Pressure mounts on freight railroads and the unions representing them to settle their contract before a looming strike on Friday. According to News Nation, the coalition negotiating on behalf of major freight railroads such as Burlington Northern and Santa Fe Railway, or BNSF, announced 8 of the tentative agreements needed to avert a strike. Deals mentioned so far closely follow the Presidential Emergency Board's recommendations, calling for 24% raises over 5 years, $5,000 in bonuses, and 1 additional day of paid leave a year.
However, the 2 biggest unions representing conductors and engineers have refrained from joining because they want to see concerns about strict attendance policies and working conditions addressed. Hope these things are addressed, obviously, because a rail strike would, I presume, be just catastrophic to an already suffering economy, to the supply chain, to all sorts of those things.
Yeah, well, so this is the whole point of a labor strike, that employers obviously can coerce employees to do any number of things, to take low wages, to have unfair labor practices, because people need to eat. People need to keep a roof over their head, and the only ways that employers can push back is to collectively bargain and make demands, as they have done here. Now, they are relying on the fact that there are economic consequences to their strike. That's the whole point of striking. So, for example, this isn't just about passenger trains. This could derail, this is per the Washington Post, critical deliveries of chlorine to wastewater treatment plants and coal to utility plants, among other potentially crippling disruptions, including, disruptions to the nation's drinking water supply. So
it's a huge problem based on what we've been covering this week.
So it's worth asking what these people are asking for, and it seems like the central hang-up here has to do with this vacation day policy, where they're given very little in terms of vacation days. They don't have weekends off, and they can be asked to work 14 days straight, and any additional time they take off outside of their very narrow, limited vacation times are docked in a point system from their careers.
You're saying these workers, they work, they get a break after 14 days. They work every weekend. They just have 14-day.
Yeah, they don't have apparently a same kind of a weekend set schedule. So if you count up all of the weekend days that you and I have off, it's right. 100 days out of the year, something like that, or just maybe shy of that, on top of holidays and sick date, 2 weeks sick leave, and all these other kinds of things. And these railroad employees, I think because of the nature of the business and how tight scheduling is and those kinds of things, they simply don't have any flexibility within their schedule. And this is something apparently that the management has been very reluctant to move on. And so a lot of workers have been interviewed. People like Max Alvarez, who's a frequent guest of this show, have talked to workers about how, they want you to also plan it a lot in advance. You can't plan when you're going to be sick. You can't plan when a baby's going to be born. You can't plan when a wedding is going to happen at the beginning of a year. You have no idea what's going to come up. And the complete and total inflexibility has caused a significant deterioration in quality of life.
Well, as you said, editor-in-chief of The Real News, Max Alvarez, says the mainstream media has finally taken an interest in covering this story, but the coverage is lacking on the workers' side. Alvarez broke down his organization's coverage of the long-brewing crisis in the rail industry, starting from when workers at BNSF were blocked from striking over what he called a, quote, draconian new attendance policy, as you were highlighting, with workers on call 24/7. Alvarez interviewing a longtime train dispatcher about how painful it's been to watch an industry he loves be destroyed by corporate greed. Now, according to CNBC, Dennis Pierce, the president of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, said rail companies BNSF and Union Pacific rejected the union's proposal for sick time policy. BNSF, however, has rejected that claim and says it's, quote, categorically false. They say rail employees are provided with significant time off. So according to CNBC, Union Pacific says the company is in active discussions to address time off concerns. And in this Washington Post article, Dennis Pierce, the president of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, said they're not that far apart in the negotiations. So hopefully everybody meets in the middle, works out a policy that is better for the workers than what they have currently, because we do not want to see a strike. It's going to be horrible.
Yeah, so one thing to keep an eye on is that, I happened to have been in France over the summer when they were experiencing some transit strikes. And even though there was a lot of congestion on the road and it was very inconvenient to people in the country, everyone that I spoke to there had a kind of, well, good, I hope the workers get what they want kind of attitude. I see already Americans focusing a lot on the employer and not at all asking the question why the employer doesn't just concede to some of these demands if the situation is as dire as is being described. So, for example, this is a description specifically of what the policies are like. Under this points-based policy that began in February, BNSF workers are given 30 points for the rest of their careers and docked points anywhere from 2 to 7 for days taken off outside of the already allocated vacation days. They can earn points back by working 14 days straight, but the total number of points they accrue can never exceed 30. These issues, plus the always-on-call nature of operating trains and railroad layoffs, have caused many rail workers to leave the profession, amounting to a 20% reduction in the workforce since 2019. Compounding the issues, you have fewer people doing more work faster, and they're not allowed to have any sorts of breaks.
So a spokesperson for the railroad says, you may have heard from labor they get no sick days or paid time off. This is false, she says unequivocally, and she says
well, that's not what this person is saying. They're not saying that they have no sick time or time off, and frankly, that sounds like a railroad employer doing what they often do, which is misrepresenting the claims of the workers in order to make themselves seem like they aren't actually engaged in coercive employment practices. So people can read, and I hope they do follow this story. The reason that we're pegged to Friday is because there has been a cooling off period. There's a 60-day cooling off period that is built into the law to try to prevent premature strikes. But that period ends Friday, and at that time, if they haven't worked out a solution to this contract negotiation, then it's likely that we're going to see some pretty significant disruptions.
And look, to be clear, I don't have any issue with workers wanting better pay, better conditions, organizing, coming together to get employers to listen to their demands. Oftentimes they are reasonable. My objection with labor unions is really confined. My sort of structural ideological objection is for public sector unions. But these railroads are ultimately owned, I believe, right? I'm not by private companies. This one's owned by what Berkshire Hathaway is the parent company of the parent company of the parent company. So you know what? Yeah, they should. Employees have every right to try to get better conditions.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they're demanding a share of the profits that they create through their labor. So, for example, it's worth pointing out that Union Pacific, the largest publicly traded U.S. railroad, paid investors more than $41 billion in dividends and share buybacks over 5 years through 2001, according to one Bloomberg analysis. And in the first 6 months of 2022, the company added another $5 billion to shareholder coffers. So employers are sitting here saying, where is all this profit coming from? I'm working my weekends to make sure the trains run on time, and I'm not seeing any of the benefits of my labor. I think this will be an interesting study for a lot of Americans who haven't been following union activity and who have seen a really declining labor force over the last 50 years. We'll see how this shakes out.
Yeah, we'll see. And we'll have more Rising right after this.